Hello there. I'm Amelia Northrup Simpson of TRG Arts, a data-driven consulting firm for arts and cultural organizations. And I'm joined today by my colleague Jim DeGood. Today, we'll be talking with Steve Knight, Director of Marketing at Actors Theatre of Louisville, about how pricing helped them maximize revenue for A Christmas Carol. This interview was originally included as part of TRG's Christmas in July webinar, a webinar that was designed to dispel one myth: that holiday events sell themselves. Now, it's true that holiday programs are hot, they attract a large audience, and they have huge revenue potential. But that does not mean that we can sit back and not be active in marketing them. The stakes are just too high. So, today we're going to change the conversation. Saying that holiday programming sells itself removes arts managers from the situation, when the reality is that these arts managers have tremendous impact. The work that the entire team at Actors Theatre of Louisville has done to implement their pricing plan and bring their staff team together around revenue optimization is tremendous. That, coupled with the revenue gains that you'll see at the end of this video, are evidence of just how much impact arts managers can have. So let's get down to business. My colleague Jim is the TRG consultant for Actors Theatre of Louisville. So Jim, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Amelia. You know, our work with Actors Theatre of Louisville began before Steve Knight even joined the team. Our project was to help Actors Theatre define how well they were serving the marketplace, how much more opportunity they could find in the marketplace. And we began that evaluation with some pricing evaluation. And what was true at Actors Theatre is true at many of our client shops, that some pricing decisions were being made based on emotion or fear of what the patrons might be saying about those pricing decisions. And what we know time and time again is that fear-based or emotion-based decision-making is not productive. We can't have strategy based on fear. Instead, we always recommend using data to drive decision-making. And this is where Steve and his leadership really came in. As we were delivering all of the findings of the TRG analysis, Steve mantled those findings, and through his leadership of that team, we're able to talk about the great results that the Actors Theatre team has seen to date. And I wonder, Steve, as we think especially around some of the pricing decisions in alignment with your holiday programming, your tentpoles of Dracula, and in this case, Christmas Carol, could you reflect upon what you were seeing at Actors Theatre when you joined that team?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. So when I arrived in summer of 2014, you know, we have a lot of legacy behind our holiday productions of Dracula and Christmas Carol, expectations from our very loyal audiences here in Kentucky. And there was a lot of sort of anecdotal information, a lot of legacy of, you know, discounting and making sure the prices were accessible to everyone, and not really understanding the audience segmentation of those people who really value that experience with their family and were willing to pay a little bit more for the you know, performances that were selling out the fastest and the best seats, and really understanding what we had here in terms of that product, which was a lovely experience. You know, this was an entire experience for those returning audience members, and we did a lot of data research with TRG to really understand who was coming, when they were coming, and kind of what they were willing to pay for that experience. So we took a deep dive with TRG, you know, multi-day, multi-month process to really look at what we had in that past data over 20 years of Christmas Carol as well as Dracula, and sort of reinforced that we weren't really, our best interest was not looking at gut instinct and looking at historical anecdotal information, and rather the actual data and what we were seeing, what families would pay to come to this fantastic production. And also, I was the new kid, so I didn't really have a lot of that legacy information. It wasn't really tied to some of those previous prices, and we looked at the data and did a lot of analyzing and restructured what we were charging for those particular performances and what we would look at in terms of demand-based pricing once those seats started to fill up really fast. And yeah. That's what we
That's
needed.
so true. That's true, Steve. You know, we also observed at Actors Theatre another trend that we tend to see in the field generally when we begin client relationships, and that is that there is some siloed decision-making that can occur. And in fact, this is true not only because of the way that we've structured leadership in organizations, but also because of the way that we have arranged for the tools that we need to help us advance our own planning. At Actors Theatre, marketing and finance were living in a ticketing system that didn't easily talk to the system that development was using. And just as Steve was joining Actors Theatre also transitioned into a CRM system that enabled marketing, finance, development, box office all to live in one system. And so from a systems perspective, we were able to break down some of those silos. But Steve, you and others also added another element that helped you break out of your traditional silos and come together as a unified group with the patron in the center to talk about how to optimize revenue. And I wonder if you can share with the field what you and others did.
Sure. So I think like many organizations, you have different departments controlling certain seats. We have group sales, development with donor seats and board member seats, patron services holding certain seats, and a lot of that wasn't cohesive. So we didn't really have a forum that we could get together and look at those houses that were in high demand and look at how we could release those seats and how we could make sure that we were optimizing the price for those seats that were sold. If a pair of house seats were being held right up until night of, there was a potential that we could lose some revenue if we weren't looking at what that actual seat was worth the day of that it sells. So I think having these meetings and bringing in those departments that weren't really communicating, other than via email and occasionally in a group meeting something might be discussed. But these meetings were set up with the sheer purpose of looking at those houses, looking at seats held, talking about what was happening in the market, and releasing those seats accordingly, or changing the prices on those seats. So in that room we had, executive leadership, box office representatives, group sales representatives, people that really understood the goal of this was to optimize revenue and also have the best patron experience, release seats when we needed to, that group sales wasn't holding seats, that those were actually paid for, and we knew those people were coming. So actually communicating on a weekly basis. And the meetings turned out to be pretty fast, pretty simple, and it gave us an opportunity to actually communicate with each other on a weekly recurring basis, where we developed a shorthand conversation about how we could release seats, what the demand levels were, when we released certain zones, and it became pretty successful.
It sounds, Steve, like this weekly meeting, the revenue pacing meeting that you've described, has led you to great success. But I also heard you say that you were joining Actors Theatre at a time where there was a great change being undertaken, some of the pricing strategies and changes among them. So I wonder, how important was leadership? And I see here on this slide that both artistic and executive leadership participate in some form in this weekly meeting. How important was it that you had leadership involved in this meeting?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the key factors of the success of this was that it came from the top, and we also, the 4 members of senior management were there, myself as marketing director, development director, general manager, as well as our managing director, were in the room with the people on the front lines, group sales agents, box office representatives, the people that were actually implementing these changes, so they could understand that this was a huge priority and that we were all involved and we were being collaborative. And it wasn't just a dictation from senior management. It was a conversation about how we were looking at each of those seats, each of those zones, when we could price them, when we thought there might be some pushback. So a very clear dialogue and very clear prioritization from senior leadership that this was a big priority for the organization. So key. I think having executive leadership in the room for those meetings was key to the success.
Mm-hmm. Well, success indeed you've had, and we'll talk about that in a moment. This is an excerpt from some of the pricing recommendations that we came to together through our collaboration. On the left-hand side, the prices that were available for Christmas Carol on an average basis, and then on the right, the recommendation that TRG brought forward, not being super aggressive on the top end, allowing you some additional accessibility price points on the bottom end of the price table. And this proposed price is where you started at the beginning of your sales cycle for those revenue pacing meetings. But I wonder, through the course of Christmas Carol 2014, where did you end up through revenue pacing with your dynamic pricing at the top end?
Sure. So we started out with that range from 25 to 60, and the revenue pacing meetings, we would typically incremental increases of $5. In that first year that we implemented this, our top ticket price got up to $70, which we're pretty proud of, and didn't get a lot of pushback. And also, you'll notice there in that third column that we lowered that zone 4 from $31 previously to $25, so that we did have accessibility price points for people that were more price sensitive, and always had those seats available. I mean, they went quickly, obviously, but earlier performances we had that $25 price point for those type constituents, and we're able to get those final performances as we got close to Christmas, when there was a really high demand, up to $70. And this data is from fiscal year 15. We're still compiling all of our data from fiscal year 16, but the top ticket price for Christmas Carol in fiscal year 16 actually got up to $76. So we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah, and through all of your revenue management, Steve, what was the bottom line impact of revenue management for Christmas Carol in 2014?
Sure. So in 2014, the bottom line impact was $150,000. That was the incremental jump from our actual original goal and from price points from the year before. So we actually went up in 33% in admissions and 55% in overall revenue from the single tickets from Carol. So so pretty impressive numbers, and that was based on collaboration with, like we said earlier, from box office and group sales and development, executive leadership, and it was really a collaborative process and not just something driven solely by marketing, which is like, I can't recommend highly enough to make sure that you've got the group in the room to have these constant conversations about this.
Mm-hmm. So $150,000 beyond your goal, I have to imagine that enables different kinds of conversations in the institution when meeting a revenue goal is no longer the pressure in front of you. What have you been able to do at Actors Theatre with the overage of revenue that you've been able to see from Christmas Carol, Dracula, and others?
Absolutely. So we host 13 fully produced productions a year. So we have 5 main stage plays, our 2 plays in our pop series, and we also host our Humana Festival every March and April, which some listeners might be familiar with. People come in from all over the country, and those are 6 fully produced world premieres. No one's ever seen those before, and we premiere those here in Louisville, Kentucky every year. And this sort of allows us to take risk during that time of year and not rely as heavily on looking at the accessibility by lots of people to come to that show. It allows us to take risk and promote new playwrights, new production elements, and so having the constant income that we have from Christmas Carol and Dracula every single year allows us to take bigger risk when it gets to our new play development. So that's a fantastic opportunity as far as our overall business model here at Actors Theatre.
Wow. So your focus on your holiday products enables you to do really cool theatrical work.
Absolutely.
That is really impressive.
Absolutely.
You know, at the end of the day, in 2 years, Steve, you've been able to see growth in revenue from your holiday blockbusters of Christmas Carol and Dracula by 36%. You've brought overall single ticket revenue up 55% since 2012. And all of that is not just based on dynamic pricing or revenue optimization, but you've also grown single ticket volume by 26%. These are really impressive results, and I know that Amelia, I, and others congratulate you.
And thank you guys for your input and your help with this. And like I said, it was an organization-wide focus and project. And again, I can't strongly recommend enough that it goes past the marketing department into other areas of the organization, and that's a constant collaborative conversation that takes place on a weekly basis. And we have those conversations. We've got those meetings down to 30 minutes a week. They go by quickly, and everyone's focused on what the outcome of those meetings are and what the next steps are, and they're wildly successful, and I can't recommend them highly enough.
Fantastic, Steve. So many good lessons here for arts organizations. Those who are watching this video, arts administrators, to learn. So let's talk about what people that are viewing this video today can do at their own organizations to optimize revenue. First, evaluate your scale of hall and pricing plans. Are they allowing you to increase prices when demand is high for certain seats and certain days? Are prices increasing as the house fills? And are houses filling from front to back and from side to side without huge gaps? So if your answer to any of those questions is no, look back at your scale of hall plan, look back on your pricing plans, and see what you can do to drive towards those goals. Second, you heard Steve say that these revenue pacing meetings made a huge difference. So this video is coming out in July. If you're watching this in the summer, this is the perfect time to make revenue pacing meetings a practice at your organization. If your season is beginning in the fall, you can start now. You can gather your staff members. You can start to think about what might be on that agenda each week once things get crazy, and also determine which metrics you want to review weekly and start figuring out how you're going to pull those reports, again, before that busy season hits. You also heard Steve say that executive and artistic leadership, having them in on these revenue pacing meetings, was critical. So now's the time to brief those executive and artistic leaders on what these meetings are and why they're important. And we know that this is a critical step for busy leadership. Get those meetings on their calendar now so that they actually show up to the meetings. Lastly, use data to drive dynamic pricing decisions. So you're going to want to be able to build flexibility into your ticketing system. And we say that flexibility, it's important because you have to be able to adjust prices on the fly that will then be the published prices for tickets when you're dynamic pricing. So evaluate your ticketing system and figure out how difficult it's going to be for the system to support your strategy. And it's important to think about what that's going to involve. You have a little time. So if your first instinct is to say, no, not this year, think about what can you do this year, but what can you do next year to optimize revenue for those holiday shows? It's all about how your systems support your needs. This is also a great time of year to evaluate sales velocity through the sales cycle and figure out what's typical for your pacing. You have this historical data now from your last production, so pull those reports and figure out how velocity typically goes for these high-demand holiday shows. So that concludes our time with Steve and Jim today. Thank you both.
Thanks, Amelia.
Thanks, Amelia. Thanks, Jim. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy Christmas in July. So find more from this Christmas in July webinar on our website at trgarts.com.